The M1 Garand, the rifle that changed war. October 14th, 1944, Hürtgen Forest, Germany. The sound came first. It was a metal hammering noise that bounced through the foggy pine trees. The experienced soldiers of the German 275th Infantry Division had never heard anything like it before. It wasn't the steady chattering of a German MG-42 machine gun. It wasn't the slower rhythm of an American Browning machine gun. It was something faster than regular rifle fire, but steady like a machine gun. Yet it was coming from individual American soldiers spread across the forest floor. German soldier Wilhelm Hartmann pressed his body into the frozen ground as wood chips exploded from the tree above his head. 8 bullets hit in less than 5 seconds. Then came a special sound, a metal ping that rang through the forest like a bell. Right after that came another 8 bullets from the same spot. The American soldier hadn't moved. He hadn't stopped to reload with shaking fingers and metal clips. He just kept firing at a speed that went against everything Hartmann knew about fighting with rifles. What the German soldiers at Hürtgen were experiencing was not a machine gun. It was the M1 Garand, semi-automatic rifle, and it was about to change infantry warfare forever by doing something no standard army rifle had ever done before. It put the firepower of an entire World War I squad into the hands of just one American soldier. The Germans called it that damned automatic rifle. They would learn to fear its special ping sound more than any other sound on the battlefield. But the scary part wasn't just the weapon itself, it was what the weapon meant. American factories could make amazing things. They could produce unlimited amounts, and this rifle was so dependable that it would fire 8 rounds as fast as a soldier could pull the trigger. It worked in any weather and any conditions. It never jammed. General George Patton would call it the greatest battle tool ever made. German reports after battles would describe facing entire American companies armed with automatic rifles. Neither statement was wrong. The M1 Garand was a huge jump forward in infantry firepower. The story of how it was created doesn't begin with military leaders having great ideas. It begins with one brilliant engineer who spent decades fighting against military red tape, tight budgets, and stubborn generals who couldn't imagine anything better than a bolt-action rifle. The journey toward the M1 began in 1919. A Canadian-born gun designer named John Cantius Garand started working at Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. The United States Army had just finished fighting World War I. American soldiers were armed mostly with the Springfield M1903 bolt-action rifle. It was an excellent weapon by 1918 standards, accurate and reliable, but it was basically the same as gun designs from the 1990s. Every American soldier had watched German machine gun teams pour out constant fire while American soldiers worked their bolt-action rifles between each shot. They had to eject spent bullet casings and put in new rounds in steps that seemed incredibly slow during combat. Garand understood that the future belonged to self-loading rifles. These were weapons that either used gas pressure or kickback energy from a fired bullet to automatically eject the empty casing and put in a fresh round. Several European designers had explored this idea, but none had made a rifle that was reliable enough, strong enough, and simple enough to be mass-produced and used in combat conditions. The technical challenges were huge. A semi-automatic rifle needed a complex mechanism that could use the violent forces when a bullet fires. It had to redirect those forces to operate the gun's action, pull out and eject an empty casing, grab a new round from a magazine, put it in the chamber, and reset the firing mechanism, all in a fraction of a second, all while staying accurate, all while surviving mud, sand, rain, snow, and the 1,000 other harsh conditions that infantry weapons faced in combat. Garand's first design, submitted in 1920, failed badly. So did his second, third, and fourth designs. The Army wasn't very excited about the whole idea of semi-automatic rifles. Bolt-action rifles were proven, understood, and cheap. Semi-automatic rifles were experimental, complex, and expensive. The military budget in the 1920s was tiny. Congress didn't see any need to pay for expensive weapon development when the country wasn't at war. But Garand kept going. He improved his design through the 1920s and early 1930s while working with very little money at Springfield Armory. The breakthrough came in 1932. He completed a design using a gas-operated rotating bolt system. It was fed by an 8-round N-block clip. The bullet he designed it for was the standard .30-06 Springfield round. This was the same powerful bullet used in the M1903 rifle and the Browning automatic rifle. This decision was very important. By using existing ammunition, Garand made sure his rifle wouldn't require completely changing the Army's supply system. The .30-06 was a powerful round. It fired a 150-grain bullet at 2,800 feet per second. It had enough power to kill at 800 yards. The N-block clip system was Garand's most controversial innovation. Instead of a removable box magazine like most semi-automatic designs, the M1 used a self-contained 8-round clip that went in from the top of the receiver. When the last round was fired, the empty clip automatically flew out with that special metal ping sound. Critics said that 8 rounds weren't enough. They said the ping sound would tell enemies when a soldier was out of bullets. They said the clip system was too complex. Garand defended his design by pointing out that the N-block clip was lighter than a removable magazine. It was less likely to get damaged. You couldn't lose it because it ejected automatically. And 8 rounds of rapid semi-automatic fire gave more real firepower than a bigger magazine on a slower rifle. Army testing through the mid-1930s was thorough. The M1 prototype fired thousands of rounds in dust chambers, cold rooms, and mud pits. It was frozen, baked, dropped, and deliberately abused to copy years of field use. Competing designs from other manufacturers failed one test after another. The M1 kept firing. In January 1936, the United States Army officially made the M1 Garand its standard service rifle. This made the American military the first major power to give semi-automatic rifles to all infantry soldiers, not just specialized troops. Production started slowly. Springfield Armory made the first M1s by hand. Skilled workers fit individual parts together. Early production rates were barely more than 100 rifles per day. But John Garand and Springfield's engineers understood that war was coming. When it arrived, America would need hundreds of thousands of rifles. They redesigned the M1 for mass production. They made manufacturing processes simpler and created interchangeable parts that could be made by contractors across the country. By 1940, production had increased to several hundred rifles daily. After Pearl Harbor, it became like an avalanche. Winchester Repeating Arms Company started making M1s at their New Haven, Connecticut facility. Springfield Armory expanded dramatically. Harrington and Richardson Arms Company, International Harvester, and other contractors joined the effort. At peak production in 1943 and 1944, American factories were making 4,000 M1 Garand rifles every single day. Each rifle had 67 precisely machined parts. It required 43 separate manufacturing steps. It had to meet measurements accurate to 1/1000th of an inch. Yet American workers, many of them women who had never seen a rifle before Pearl Harbor, made weapons with precision and reliability that was better than peacetime standards. The M1 Garand weighed 9.5 pounds empty. It measured 43.5 inches long. It had a 24-inch barrel. The gas system used a small hole near the muzzle to capture gases from each fired round. These gases pushed a piston that unlocked and rotated the bolt, pulled out an empty bullet casing, cocked the hammer, and put in the next round from the N-block clip. The entire cycle took less than 1/10 of a second. A trained soldier could empty an 8-round clip in about 5 seconds, faster if he wasn't worried about accuracy, slower if he was taking careful aimed shots, but always much faster than any bolt-action rifle. The first American soldiers to carry M1s into combat were Marines landing on Guadalcanal in August 1942. The jungle environment immediately tested every claim made about the rifle's reliability. Humidity rusted metal, sand wore down moving parts, mud covered every surface. The M1 kept firing. German soldier Wilhelm Hartmann, Germany's Arsaka 38 Springfield Lee. By 1943, every branch of the American military was getting M1s as fast as factories could make them. Army infantry divisions in North Africa carried them against German and Italian forces. Paratroopers jumped with them into Sicily and Italy. And in June 1944, when American soldiers stormed onto the Normandy beaches, almost every rifleman carried an M1 Garand. The German army that met the Americans in Normandy was the most experienced military force in the world. They were battle-hardened by 5 years of constant combat across Europe and Russia. But German infantry were armed mostly with the Karabiner 98K, a bolt-action rifle that was basically an improved version of the Mauser 98 from 1898. It was an excellent weapon by bolt-action standards, accurate, reliable, and well-made, but it required the soldier to manually work the bolt after each shot. This was a series of movements that took even well-trained soldiers at least 2 seconds, often longer during the stress of combat. The tactical results became clear within days of the Normandy landings. American squads could put out steady fire that German units couldn't match without using their belt-fed MG-42 machine guns. In firefights at typical ranges of 100 to 300 yards, the amount of fire from American M1s often forced German soldiers to take cover before they could shoot back effectively. The psychological effect was significant. German troops reported facing what they thought were entire squads armed with automatic weapons. Captured German documents from late 1944 showed the German Army's growing concern about American firepower advantage. A tactical report from the German 352nd Infantry Division, which had fought Americans since D-Day, said, "The enemy rifleman is armed with a semi-automatic weapon that works very well. Rate of fire appears similar to submachine guns at close range. All infantry attacks must plan for steady fire from enemy rifle positions that cannot be stopped by small arms fire alone." The M1's advantages went beyond just raw firepower. The semi-automatic action made soldiers much less tired compared to bolt-action rifles. A soldier working a bolt-action 50 or 60 times during a firefight would get tired arms and slower reactions. An M1 user just pulled the trigger, allowing him to keep faster reactions and better accuracy during long fights. The reduced recoil kick compared to bolt-action rifles helped as well. The gas-operated system absorbed some of the recoil energy, making follow-up shots faster and more accurate. But the M1 wasn't perfect. That special ping when the end block clip flew out after the 8th round became legendary. Stories went around that German soldiers would wait to hear the ping before attacking. In reality, the sound was rarely heard over battlefield noise, and any soldier who assumed an American was empty after 8 shots would often be killed by the soldier's quickly reloaded rifle or by his squad mates who were still firing. The end block clip system did have one real limitation. The rifle couldn't be topped off during a break in fighting. Once a clip was put in, it stayed until all 8 rounds were fired. Soldiers learned to count their shots and reload at good moments, but this required more attention than simply swapping magazines. The rifle also needed more maintenance than bolt-action rifles. The gas system needed regular cleaning to prevent carbon buildup that could slow the action. The operating rod could bend if the rifle was dropped on its muzzle at the wrong angle. But American supply lines and training made up for these issues. Every soldier learned how to take apart and maintain the M1. repair specialists at the company level could replace damaged parts. And the huge amount of spare parts flowing through the supply system meant that a damaged rifle could be quickly fixed or replaced. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 gave the ultimate test of the M1's reliability in extreme cold. Temperatures dropped below 0 Fahrenheit. Snow covered everything. Weapons froze. German forces, betting on winter weather to stop Allied air power and slow their advance, launched a massive counterattack through the Hürtgen Forest. American units, many of them new replacement soldiers, rushed to the front, found themselves outnumbered and surrounded in frozen forests. At Bastogne, the 101st Airborne Division, surrounded and cut off, held against repeated German attacks. The paratroopers, armed mostly with M1 Garands, kept up disciplined fire against attacking German infantry and tanks. The semi-automatic fire from hundreds of M1s created defensive firepower that German commanders couldn't overcome without artillery support. Captain Charles Kokorek, commanding Easy Company of the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, reported, "The M1 gave us the firepower to hold positions that would have needed twice as many men with bolt-action rifles, even during constant attack. Our fire never slowed down because individual soldiers could keep up effective rates of fire without exhausting themselves working bolt actions." The cold weather showed one M1 weakness. The rifle's gas system could freeze if water got into the gas cylinder, but this problem affected all semi-automatic and automatic weapons. German MG-42 machine guns had similar freezing problems. The difference was that American soldiers had been trained to prevent this by keeping their gun actions clear of snow and water. German units, less familiar with semi-automatic actions on rifles, had no similar experience for their standard infantry weapons. In the Pacific theater, the M1 proved equally effective under completely different conditions. The jungle fighting on islands like Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa happened at close ranges, where the M1's rapid fire ability was decisive. Japanese defensive tactics focused on close-range ambushes and sudden counterattacks, designed to cancel out American firepower advantages. But Marines and soldiers with M1s could respond instantly with steady fire that broke up these attacks before they got close enough for hand-to-hand fighting. Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone, who had survived Guadalcanal and received the Medal of Honor for his actions there, returned to combat with the 5th Marine Division at Iwo Jima in February 1945. During the first attack on the black volcanic sand beaches, Basilone led his machine gun section through devastating Japanese fire. He would be killed on the first day of the battle. But the Marines advancing with him were armed with M1 Garands that gave the steady fire needed to suppress Japanese positions while assault teams moved forward. The amount to fire from Marine rifle companies, each man able to fire rapid semi-automatic shots, was repeatedly noted in reports after battles as crucial to defeating Japanese defensive positions. The M1's accuracy was another often overlooked advantage. While not a specialized sniper rifle, the M1 was accurate enough to effective aimed fire at ranges up to 500 yards. This extended the effective range of American infantry beyond what German or Japanese forces could match with standard infantry weapons. American soldiers trained to take aimed shots at 300 yards, knowing their M1s would hit where they aimed, and that they could fire multiple rounds quickly to make sure they hit. By early 1945, the American military had put over 4 million M1 Garand rifles into service. They armed infantry divisions across Europe and the Pacific. They equipped paratroopers and rangers. They served with Marine Corps units on every Pacific island. The industrial achievement this represented was amazing. 4 million complex semi-automatic rifles, each made to exact standards, distributed across global supply lines, supported by millions of spare parts and billions of rounds of .30-06 ammunition. German intelligence reports on captured M1s were all impressed. A technical evaluation done by German weapons specialists in late 1944 noted the rifle's tough construction, the elegance of its gas system, and the reliability of its action. The report concluded that the M1 represented a big advantage in infantry firepower that German forces cannot match with current equipment. Some German officers recommended immediate development of a similar semi-automatic rifle. But by 1945, Germany lacked the factory capacity, raw materials, and time to start such a program. The Soviet Union, America's wartime ally, received about 50,000 M1 Garands through Lend-Lease shipments. Soviet weapons officers evaluated the rifle and found it effective, but ultimately they found it unsuited to Soviet tactics and manufacturing capabilities. The M1 required precision manufacturing and careful maintenance, both challenging under Soviet factory conditions. The Soviets chose to continue making their own semi-automatic rifles, the SVT-40, though in much smaller numbers than originally planned. They continued to rely mostly on bolt-action Mosin-Nagant rifles for most infantry soldiers. The testimony of German soldiers captured during the final months of the war showed the psychological impact of facing M1 armed American infantry. Interrogation reports noted repeating themes. German prisoners described American riflemen as having unlimited ammunition because the steady fire never seemed to stop. They reported being unable to raise their heads during firefights because American fire was so intense. And they always overestimated the number of American soldiers they had faced, mistaking the firepower of M1-equipped squads for much larger groups. One particularly revealing interrogation report from March 1945 quoted a German lieutenant captured near the Rhine. Quote, "We thought we were facing an entire company. The fire never stopped. Every American seemed to have an automatic rifle. Our orders were to wait for them to reload, then counterattack. But they never stopped shooting long enough for us to move. When we finally surrendered, we discovered we had been pinned down by just one platoon, 30 or 40 men at most. With our weapons, we would have needed 100 men to create that much fire." End quote. The M1 served throughout the Korean War and into the early years of Vietnam before finally being replaced by the M14 and then the M16. But its impact on infantry warfare was permanent. It proved that a reliable semi-automatic rifle could be mass-produced, that it would work in any environment, and that it gave a real tactical advantage over bolt-action weapons. Every modern military rifle, from the Soviet AK-47 to the American M16 to today's weapons, owes its existence to the proof of concept that John Garand's rifle provided. The numbers tell the story of the M1's dominance. Between 1936 and 1957, over 5.5 million M1 Garand rifles were made. During World War II alone, American factories produced about 4 million of them. These rifles fired billions of rounds of .3006 ammunition in combat across every theater of the war. The M1 equipped 16 million American servicemen during World War II. It served in Korea, saw action in Vietnam, and remains in limited use by some military organizations today, more than 80 years after it was adopted. But beyond the numbers, the M1 Garand represented something basic about American industrial and military thinking. It showed that the belief that American soldiers deserved the best equipment available. It showed that factory capacity could solve tactical problems. And it showed that technology advantage mattered as much as training and courage. The soldiers who carried M1s into combat knew they had a weapon that gave them an edge. They knew their rifle would fire every time they pulled the trigger. They knew they could put more rounds downrange faster than any enemy they would face. When German soldiers reported facing American infantry armed with automatic rifles, they weren't imagining things. They were experiencing the reality of semi-automatic fire. They were facing soldiers who could shoot as fast as they could pull the trigger, who never stopped to work a bolt action, who poured out steady fire that made movement deadly and cover not good enough. The M1 didn't turn average soldiers into supermen, but it did give them firepower that previous generations of infantry could never have imagined. In 1945, as American forces overran Germany from east and west, they met German soldiers who had fought on every front, faced every weapon, and survived the most intense combat of the war. When asked what they feared most about American infantry, their answer was the same: that rifle that never stopped firing, that special ping that meant an American soldier was reloading in seconds, not minutes. That steady fire that made German bolt-action rifles feel like relics from an earlier war. General Patton called the M1 Garand the greatest battle tool ever made. He wasn't exaggerating. In the hands of American soldiers who had trained to use it well, supplied with unlimited ammunition, and backed by a factory capacity that made thousands of rifles daily, the M1 Garand changed infantry combat forever. It turned American soldiers into walking firepower platforms. It gave them confidence from technology advantage, and it taught the Axis powers a brutal lesson about industrial warfare. The side that arms its soldiers better will win. The Germans thought every American soldier fired like a machine gun, because in a very real sense they did. 8 rounds of semi-automatic fire in 5 seconds, repeated over and over. Supported by unlimited supplies and backed by the most productive industrial system in history, the M1 Garand didn't win World War II by itself, but it gave American infantry a decisive edge in thousands of firefights across 6 continents. And it proved that John Cantius Garand's decades of work had created something truly revolutionary, a rifle so effective that enemy soldiers couldn't believe it was just a rifle. That metal ping still echoes in military history, the sound of empty en-bloc clips flying out from millions of M1 Garands, each one representing 8 rounds of American firepower, each one followed immediately by a fresh clip and 8 more rounds. The Germans called it that damned automatic rifle. Americans just called it the M1. And when they heard its special bark in the hands of their fellow soldiers, they knew they were carrying the best infantry weapon in the world.